This is my instructional plan for my final project for EDT 6050. So to start with our data, this instructional plan is based on our reading map scores for the fall of 2023 and 2024. Based on this graph here, you can see that 50% of students are falling below the 41st percentile in reading, and 32% of that is just the first through the 20th percentile. These MAP scores are based nationwide, so these percentiles are based on students within that grade throughout the entire country. This chart breaks down the percentage of students within that first to 20th percentile. As you can see from this graph, it is not a specific grade level problem. This is more a school-wide epidemic of students having trouble with reading, specifically their instructional text scores. So one way to help students understand instructional text, which is literary text, which comes down to the comprehension. One strategy is to have students summarize their reading. This is basically a student retelling a story because it helps them focus on details that they read themselves. Another way that students can, or another instructional strategy would be for students to be asking questions about the story, because this shows comprehension, because you can't ask a question about something if you really don't know what you're reading. So this forces students to think about what they're reading and how they can formulate a question from that. And then the last instructional strategy would be to use a graphic organizer, which this actually just breaks down the story elements in the story. And that is the instructional strategy that I chose. So a graphic organizer will help explain each story element. And this can look like having the characters, setting, problem solution, and key events all written down on one sheet. This is easily tracked throughout the school year because you can have students do multiple graphic organizers. And this can be streamlined throughout the whole school. Because this is a school-wide problem and this strategy will be implemented into every classroom, this is basically a rubric for all teachers to use, because with asking questions and summarizing a story, there is room for error in grading, because some teachers can think that the summary is efficient while others may not. And then that comes down to, well, what is a summary and how detailed does it have to be? And what specific questions should they be asking? Whereas a graphic organizer is very clear cut. Who are the characters? What is the setting? What was the problem in the story? And these are very clear for a teacher to see whether or not a student comprehended that story. So what this would look like in a classroom is a teacher starts by filling out a graphic organizer with correct information. This can be done by using books that they've already read in class and have students fill those out together with the teacher. And then they can be monitoring and guiding students who are doing their own organizers on what information they may be missing or that they need to add. For students, they need to know the definitions of each of the prompts within the graphic organizer. And then they can start filling out these based on books that they've read. So to help with that in the classroom, there can be posters with the definitions of each story element, such as what is a character? A character is the person in the story. And then lastly, the student work. This you would be seeing successfully filled out graphic organizers with those parts of the story. So for my timeline, I started with my learner-centered problem, which is that students are having trouble comprehending literary text. Now, the problem of practice here, which goes more towards the teachers, is that there's not enough curriculum designated to comprehension of literary text and not enough guidance on what supplemental resources to use. So teachers are having extra time in their classrooms, but not really any support on what they should use and how they should be teaching this comprehension. So my instructional strategy was to implement graphic organizers into classrooms when reading literary text. So a timeline of this would be to start by having reading specialists meet with team leaders to discuss how to implement graphic organizers into these reading classes. So this would be the fourth week in October, um, which is when quarter one ends. So then the team leaders bring this to the classroom so that teachers can see this modeled in the classroom at the beginning of quarter two. And this is when classroom teachers take over and they begin teaching the different parts of the organizer, such as like the definitions of each part. That'll be middle of November, and then students will go on Thanksgiving break and come back and then start working on a graphic organizer together on a book that they've read in class. So then winter break comes, and when they come back, quarter two is over, and classroom teachers can work in small groups of students so that they can make sure that no students are falling behind and that all students understand what the task is and what they're being asked to do. Throughout quarter three, students will be doing their own graphic organizers based on books that they've read on their own. And then lastly, teachers can meet with team leaders to discuss how the progress with the graphic organizers is going and discuss end of year test scores to see if this instructional strategy has made a difference. For evaluations for this strategy, formal assessments within the classroom can just be exit tickets at the end of the lesson, such as who was the character in that story or what was the problem that you saw in the story. And then, more specifically can be individual student work, like grading a student's graphic organizer based on a book that they read. A more summative assessment would be the MAP testing scores to see how instructional text has increased or decreased or stayed the same throughout the year. So this presentation has been based on fall scores,